John, thanks for being here.
Hey, Dan.
I saw you. I have little screens of us at the bottom when the intro comes in, and I saw you. I saw you make a face when you read solitudinarian. I'm like, you were like, what?
Solitudinarian.
It's a word. It's a word, man.
Oh, I thought it was maybe a denomination.
No, it's a word, and it means someone. Well, it actually means someone who likes to be alone. So it's.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Sometimes, yeah.
So again, thank you very much for doing this. And I've been trying to get John Butterfield in any way possible for 3 years. I've been harassing you for 3 years, John.
Well, I did a little intro for you once.
Yeah, I remember. Yes, I remember. That's when you started saying, okay, this guy is really bugging me. Maybe I should do something and get rid of him. But then I went to WBC. So
well, we hung out at WBC one evening with some nice,
which was a lot of fun.
What was that?
It was like 2 years ago. We were sitting with Mark Herman and another one of his friends. I forget. And we were having some beverages, and this was my first con, John. It's the first time I meet you, first time I meet Mark Herman, first time I meet anybody. And you can imagine, I'm a fan. I say, what?
I didn't know that was your first convention.
That was my first con.
Ever?
Well, no, I went to the old Avalon Hill Con once in Montreal many, many years ago. I must have been 15, 16 years old, maybe. I don't remember. But nothing like WBC.
Yeah.
I mean, our cons, even Montreal has a con run by Matt Gunnett called Stack Academy.
Mark Jeanette.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I went to that once. The one, yeah.
The one in Montreal, is that right?
8 years ago, I think I went.
Right. Anyways, that's the biggest war con there, and it's still quaint. It's very nice, very well run. But in terms of numbers, even WBC in terms of numbers is supposed to be tiny.
Well, when you compare it to something like Gen Con or Origins, yeah.
Man.
Those are like in the tens of thousands, right?
Yeah,
WBC is about 2,000.
WBC was about 2,000 to 3,000. I don't know if I'd enjoy being around 50, 60, 70,000 people, man. There's just how can I sit down with John Butterfield and have a game? I mean, there's going to be millions of people, man. Anyways.
Yeah, it's a different thing. Yeah, I haven't actually been to those really large events either. No. I went to Gen Con in the early 80s when it was a small thing.
Was Gen Con was a war?
It was kind of role playing, I think, more at the time. Had some wargaming as well, but it was a much smaller event, and it was in different sites back then.
Oh,
every year it was in a different place, but then I think they settled on wherever they are now.
You ever go to Essen?
I haven't been to Essen. No, I haven't been to that show there. That's huge also.
Yeah. Anyways, John, I have chat open. People will be asking questions. So you know what? Let me ask a few questions first, and then people have been waiting for this interview for a while. So I'm sure they're going to want to ask questions. So let me do something here. Okay. Let me get right into it, John. Get ready for this.
What's my favorite color?
And we're going to talk about this map in a few seconds, but
colors.
Let's get to the crux of the matter. Big guns first, man. If you were to do this game again, hold on a second here.
What game?
Okay. I knew you were anxious. Now, if we were to do this game again, John, you see that?
Yeah, Ambush, sure.
Right. Now, it's a favorite of many people. I haven't heard any bad anything about this game, because once you learn the system, you understand it, and it moves quickly, and narration and the narrative is wonderful. Now, if you were to do this again, I don't know. I'm sure any game demands a lot of work, but for some reason, this game just seems to go overboard in the amount of work it took to do. I might be mistaken, but what would you change in a game like this? Would you change anything?
Well,
I mean, would you change the sleeve mechanism?
oh no, I wouldn't really touch anything in the game. I would, it was a team effort, and the result I think everyone was happy with, except that the amount of work it took to accomplish the game, I think, makes you sick of working on it.
Yeah, and
yeah. So it was the game started. Ambush started as a feedback proposal when it was still SPI. When we were working at SPI, and I think the feedback proposal was called Combat. It was written because I had designed a paragraph-based game called Voyage of the Pandora.
Right.
For Ares, the science fiction magazine, and that was very well received. And so our editorial department, Bob Ryer and Michael Moore, thought, oh, what if you could do like the old '60s TV show Combat, using kind of recreate that feel. So they proposed it, and then when SPI went under, the proposal kind of came with us to Victory Games, and Bob Ryer had some ideas for the game, but didn't really have time to work on it because he was heading up the editorial department. So it fell to me to design the game, and then so I designed the systems, but then the work of and this the sleeve mechanism, I think, was a combination of Bob and me. And then, but then once we had I had the system down, it was so much work to create these scenarios that Eric Lee Smith came on board, and we split that work of designing the missions, I guess they were called, right? He did 4 of them, I did 4 of them. Then I wrote some vehicle rules. So some of the scenarios include vehicles. And then I actually left Victory before it was published.
Really?
Yeah. And I finished the game in a hotel room, my work on the game in a hotel room in Hartford, Connecticut, because I had gone to work for Coleco, the toy company that did.
Right.
Yeah, they did ColecoVision, and they were more famous for the Cabbage Patch dolls, I guess. Anyway, so I finished it, but then so Ambush became this big hit, and they wanted to do more of them. I know that Eric and Mark Herman worked on some of the sequels, but then they brought in a fellow named Joe Reiser to work on them. Yeah, I think that the process is so laborious that so when you ask the question, what would I change about it? I wouldn't change anything about it, but I wouldn't ever do it again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I heard you say that before. And now, I mean, here's another general question in terms of trademark copyright to this game and its series. This belongs to Hasbro right now. Is that right?
Well, I think so, although, yes, it does, but I'm not sure they know it. I mean, because, they acquired, I forget what the order is, but they acquired Avalon Hill.
Right.
And Avalon Hill owned Victory Games. And so they got a whole bunch of stuff, but the things they were interested were not this necessarily. So they own the rights to it. And, but the notion, the idea of a paragraph-based hex by hex tactical World War II war game, anyone could do that if they wanted to. People say, why don't you reprint it? Well, because I can't. But if someone's saying, actually, why aren't there more games using this kind of system?
Right.
They could do that. That they could design something. And
yeah, but it looks like an engineering feat when you come to the sleeves, man.
Yeah, but that's not particular to me, and that was a group effort, and that, yeah. Although I don't know, would I do it with a sleeve now? I mean, you could probably do it computer assisted.
Exactly.
Have a computer spreadsheet that looks this stuff up for you. But on the other hand, part of the delight of playing board war games is that it's all all tactile.
Yeah, right? I know.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing that. And I think there is an app that someone did Excel wise, and I don't know where it is right now, but I always went back to the cards, the sleeves, because it's just easy going, and you're supposed to relax when you play a game, not whatever. Yeah, I'm losing my mind there, John. Whatever. All right. Yeah. So you know what? I'll throw in a question, and then I'll have someone else ask a question.
Sure.
Here. And here you go, Nathanael Robinson. Are there any games that you've tried to follow in the tradition of ambush that have been successful?
Are there any games that have tried to follow in the tradition of ambush that have been successful?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that means what part of the tradition? That is a solitaire game that's a man-to-man level game?
I'm assuming he's talking about like paragraph run game.
I don't know of any in particular. I
mean, I know there was Battle Hymn done.
That's part of the ambush series.
That's right. Leather.
There were about 5 other volumes after it. There was Purple Heart, Silver Star, Battle Hymn,
Move Out,
and then there was an attempt to do one that was about tanks.
You're talking about Open Fire.
Open Fire, yeah. But I wasn't involved in any of those. Right. So they follow. They're part of the series. I guess I'm looking at this question more generally. Are there other games that in the world? But so I guess I would say no. There have certainly been man-to-man, individual soldier level World War II tactical games. And now there are some that are solitaire, like Conflict of Heroes has a solitaire version. And there's a couple other solo games out there. But I can't think of any that are really narrative paragraph based.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, do you have any interest in redoing something else with those mechanics, like a space game with those mechanics, a space infantry or something?
No. I mean, I've been pretty. Every time it comes up, and Eric Lee Smith and Mark Herman say the same thing. It's just insanity to work on the thing.
So it's because game designers are artists to me. Okay, they have the artist mentality, and they are artists. And is it basically you do one project and then you move on and you forget about it and on to bigger and better things?
Well, you don't forget about it because a good system is worth doing other things with if it's envisioned as a system. Like behind you is D-Day at Omaha Beach.
Yeah.
That wasn't originally thought of as a system. I thought of what's the best way to design a simulation of the situation on that day, June 6th, 1944 at Omaha Beach. And so I came up with that design and I didn't start with the idea it would be solo, But then as the more I researched and the more I started designing the game, I thought the Germans, there should not be a German player in this game. This game has to be about the American struggle and triumph on that day. So it became a solitaire game.
Well, I love the game. I love the game totally. I've never won the game.
But then once it was published and was successful and was well received, there was, immediate demand for other games using the system. And so I thought it could apply to other, not island, but amphibious assault games. And so I did Tarawa and then Peleliu. But then I felt I had played out pretty much on the system. That in order for it to handle other things, it would have to change too much. And I would instead rather, if you told me, someone suggested, for example, why don't you do Stalingrad using the system? And that made no sense to me. If I did want to do a Stalingrad game, I wouldn't start with a system. I'd just start from scratch.
So I mean,
it's the subject matter and the system have to work together, or else it's just a stretch.
Now, John, when you say starting from scratch, you're pulling ideas from other games, your games, to create.
I steal a lot of stuff.
Right, of course. I mean, look, any great artist steals and makes it their own. Any great artist, okay? Because if we think we're going to do something original, it stopped when Bach died. When Bach died, there was nothing more original. But anyways, I digress.
Interesting.
That was supposed to be funny, but anyways.
Well, I'm ruminating on it,
Well, we only have an hour, John. Okay, so let me get another question here. All right, Martin Sample asks, you've done a fair amount of World War II and sci-fi games. Are there other areas you see yourself delving into on the design side? Are you going underwater soon, John? You're going to do a submarine game.
Well, that could also be science fiction. In Voyage of the Pandora, there was an underwater environment.
See, I don't have that game.
Pardon?
I don't have that magazine yet.
Okay. But most of my game designs have been either World War II era or science fiction. I developed some modern warfare games when I was at SPI, like the Central Front series. The first one was Fifth Corps. That was the James Dunnigan design, and I developed that. But I don't have any thoughts about games on other subjects. To me, science fiction and fantasy are so broad, it allows you to design anything. So,
because I know you did.
Space Corp is the most recent thing I've done.
No, Avalon Hill or Victory Games, Freedom of the Galaxy.
Well, Freedom in the Galaxy was originally an SPI game.
And
it was a loving homage to and ripoff of Star Wars. So people have said to me recently, why don't you do that again or reprint it? Well, actually, I don't know who owns the rights to that, but my answer is, well, it's been done better with Star Wars Rebellion, the big game. Yeah, that's a wonderful game, and it covers the same kind of subject, and goes back to the authentic,
And did you see it
instead of a ripoff?
In Star Wars Rebellion, did you see any of your mechanics, your ideas incorporated in there?
Not specifically, no. I mean, but it was about, getting. There were many locations to deal with, and you could get them to go into rebellion, or as the Empire, you could go in and increase your control. But I think that Freedom of the Galaxy, stole that conceptually from the movies. So no, there's nothing, I don't think, in Rebellion that was actually taken mechanically from.
Okay.
From Freedom of the Galaxy.
All right.
Yeah.
So John, here's the next. Oh, you know what? This was just. I was lying in bed and thinking of, like, what am I going to ask John? And it's funny. I I like to buy CDs and stuff. And sometimes an artist reaches a certain point where they've amassed a large amount of work. Okay. For example, the Joni Mitchell box set. I get her first 10 albums. You know what I'm saying? I get her first 10 albums.
Well, I can listen to Blue all day. That's a great
album. I know, because you've been published with different companies. It would be really awesome to have a box set of John Butterfield solo games. Now, what's the possibility, John, of you getting to work at something like that and offering us a 10-box game box set of John Butterfield?
Where does this idea come from?
It would sell. It would sell
the games. Hopefully, buy the ones that are still in print, because I get royalties for those. If you buy them if they're out of print, I don't.
Because
I guess Decision could take all the D-Day games and offer a deluxe big box of them. That would be kind of cool, but I've never really thought about that.
So you need me. You need me as an agent.
Yeah.
You need me as an agent. I'll get you 10% extra no matter what.
But Enemy Action Ardennes is already such a thing. It's 3 complete games in one box.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that, John. Yeah, you're stealing my thunder here.
Oh,
please.
Sorry.
And the reason why I asked that is because Steve Jackson games. Steve Jackson
Pocket Box Games bundle. Wow.
And there's 7 or 8 games in here. For example, like
Car Wars and
Car Wars was not in this one, but the great hit of Kung Fu 2100, or a 1-page bulge, John.
Oh, that's a classic. Never played it though. I don't know.
And that's when I thought, John Butterfield could do something like that. Get all his games in one box and whatever. It was just a thought, John.
Well, first I'd have to want to do it, but
yeah.
So think. I guess if you look at series of games, like the Combat Commander series from Chad Jensen, they could do something with that, or
but you're not involved in there.
Well, I'm not talking about me.
But it's about you. This show's about you, man.
Okay, all right. No, I was going to talk about other people's games I've played recently, but
actually, you know what, we're going to get into that. I mean, that's something I wanted you to do for my channel, my other channel, my brother channel. This is the sister channel, but it's a party.
A media empire.
Yeah, but it's a party. We got John Butterfield in the house, and how often does that happen? Okay, what was I? Okay, you were talking about Kharkov and Enemy Action Ardennes came into my mind, but before that, this map, John. How do you dream something like that? How does that happen? It's like a Kandinsky.
Well, it was based on wanting to relieve the player of the responsibility of or the pain of line of sight rules. So every position where there's an enemy unit, there's symbology on the map which tells you what that unit can see and what it can fire at. You don't have to calculate it yourself. If you've got something in a hex that can be fired on, you look at the hex and it tells you exactly which positions can fire at you and the strength of their fire. It's all encoded into the map. So it got colorfully complex, and some people love that and some people hate that.
Well, like I was saying, when I first opened the box, I'm like, oh my God. See, I'm ADD, right? So I either see one thing or I see nothing. And here it just looked like a wash of colors. And I thought, oh man, I'm getting seasick. How am I going to do this?
Well, that's good. You've just done a sea landing. You should be seasick. I didn't think of that as.
I know. It just came to me. I don't know. I'm special that way. And but then I played the game, and the map just completely opened up to me. I understood. I see everything very clearly. It plays like butter. You know what I'm saying? If you ever played butter, it plays like butter, and it's very smooth. It's actually genius, man. Like, how I can't visualize something like that. Like, did you get any help in bringing this onto paper? Like, how do you?
No, that was me, but the inspiration for it was primarily Joe Balkowski's book on D-Day at Omaha Beach, which is definitely the authoritative account of that day and the most compelling. And in reading that book and other sources, the Germans were primarily static.
Yeah.
Right? Until you got up into the hedgerow battles. And so I thought that could be kind of inscribed into the map. And so I started doing that and started playing with it. It had to go through several iterations before it really worked. But yeah. So, I mean, the crazy colors is just so that you can have, I mean, not crazy.
John. Oh no. People, we lost John. What am I going to do now? Oh.
Am I there?
Yeah.
I'm back.
Yeah.
I'm back. Someone didn't want me talking about the crazy colors.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, the colors are there because it allows you to more easily distinguish between positions that are proximate to each other. So if there's just red dots, they came from this red position.
That's right.
Because the next red position is pretty far away from it.
That's right, and that's why it opens. You understand that it opens up, and it's really, it's a thing of beauty. Really, it really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm not going to make another analogy. I think it takes too long. And you know something, John? I always thought of you as a World War II type of guy, But now, because I didn't know your past games, I didn't know the SPI game we just spoke about, the Freedom.
Freeman.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know about Pandora. I didn't know you made sci-fi games. Stargate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Was that another one of your games?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I first got into you when I got into Ambush, I think. And then I got RAF. Oh my God. John, game designers right now, and I said this, I don't know who I said this to. I think I said it to Morgan. Game designers now are what chefs have become rock stars. Like you can watch a cooking show and it's like, here's Emerald Lagasse. Yeah, bam, and he's a rock star. Ah. That's what's happening with game designers now. Now, you're a rock star, John.
Yeah. I don't have the income of a rock star.
No, but yeah. Anyways,
yeah, but so you bring up RAF, which is an entirely different set of mechanics.
Now is that the first time you came up with the 3 rule book, 3 games in a package idea?
Well, the original RAF was not that. It was just the one I did with West End Games in the 1980s was just from the British perspective. It was a solo game only.
So that's what came out first, the West End one.
Yeah. And then that was, that did well in the mid 1980s. But then when I got back into the hobby around 2005, 2006, and I started working on Omaha, it just got me thinking again about RAF and the challenge. Could that also be a 2-player game? Could it be a German game? And so I started looking at that and decided to go ahead and try to do that. Um, and the other thing that made me revisit RAF was that I had gotten to know Lee Brimacombe Wood, who did The Burning Blue and several other air games. And he informed me that there had been a lot more data on the Battle of Britain that had been declassified and made public in the 20 intervening years between the original RAF and 2006, and that he used a lot of that data in his work on Burning Blue. And he was pointing out how there were a lot of inaccuracies, or not inaccuracies, but wrong assumptions in the original RAF, primarily around pilot fatigue and things like that. So he shared that research with me and where to find it. And so I looked into that. And not only did I do the two other versions, that is the solo version, German, and the two-player, but I also revisited the core mechanics of the original game and changed them to more accurately reflect the way the battle was actually conducted strategically.
Now,
in the original game, there was a lot of focus on fatigue, like pilots were tired and it would affect their performance, because that was anecdotally brought up a lot in the books about it, because it seemed like, those pilots were so exhausted and heroic. It turned out that fatigue had no impact at all on performance. So I had to scrap that entire premise from the game, which was huge in the first game, and rethink about how performance would be presented in the game. So
now, when you revisit a game like that and you pull out a second edition, let's say, is that a done deal for you with that game? Does that game now go away and you start something else, or can you actually revisit a revisited game?
Well, that's a good question. I think with RAF, that's done. I guess the only reason I would revisit a game already published is if it's been pointed out to me by players that it's unbalanced or something like that. Then I might want to look at how to solve that, how to correct that. There's this. People say that my solitaire games are almost impossible to win, some of them more than others, but that's definitely been said of my two Island D-Day games, Peleliu and Terra.
I never won, but it never detracted me from opening it up.
Well, yeah, people enjoy them still, but I did make some adjustments in the second editions of both those games, but it still wasn't enough for most players. So I may do that again. I don't have any immediate plans to, but that's something on the back burner. But that's only the only type of adjustments I would make. I mean, I think with the exception of RAF, I think any creative work should just be allowed to stand. I mean, if you have something more to say in general about a topic, then I think that would be a separate game. Like I have more than one game on the Ardennes. I have Enemy Action Ardennes, but I also have this very simple game called Battle of the Baltrum Compass, which was also kind of the same game that I did for the iPad. But that's an entirely different take on the battle.
Yes.
So, yeah, but to revisit a game that is kind of already done and works, I don't really think I would do that. I would rather do new things.
Right. John, let me go here. Combat Board Games asks, in Voyage of the BSM Pandora, you pioneered the paragraph game. I didn't know that. You really did that?
Yes, that was the first ever paragraph game. It wasn't the first ever use of program paragraphs. There were books already out.
Right, okay.
Was it Build Your Own Adventure or something like that?
Steve Jackson had tons of this. Go to page 85 if you make this thing. Go to page 28 if you decide this. That's what you're talking about, right?
well, it wasn't Steve Jackson. It was a paperback book publisher that they had a make your own adventure
Oh,
game.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay.
Books. Anyway, so there have been I'd seen a couple books that did that, and but again, the I didn't set out to say, I didn't start by saying I want to do a paragraph based solo game. My assignment was to create a prequel to an existing game called Wreck of the Pandora, which was kind of a take on Alien. You know, you have this ship and this alien is running amok and you're trying to not get destroyed. So that game was designed by Jim Dunnigan. And then the idea was, well, let's do a prequel to that about the voyages of the ship where it collected these biological specimens. So I started designing that and thought, well, that sounds like a whole bunch of narratives of going to a planet and having an adventure and doing that several times. Well, let's write stories and turn it into program paragraphs to allow that type of game experience to happen. So that's how that developed.
So isn't that more in the RPG realm?
Well, a role-playing game is not a solitaire experience. That's a group experience with a games master and friends, and so they're associated with RPG.
Well, I mean, there are games now that you don't need a GM.
Well, yeah. So I guess since then,
yeah,
there have been solitaire versions of RPGs. But
here, Kabuki Kid asks, "Do you know Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective game?"
Oh, I remember that game.
And does that count for paragraph? I don't know.
I
mean, that's a good question, but I don't know.
You find clues, and then as you unlock the clues, you get to go read things, right?
Exactly.
Well, that came out after.
Came out after. Sure.
I don't think I had seen that when I think it came out after Pandora, but I'm not certain.
I mean, I remember playing Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective.
Me
and my wife, we get together. Great, we're gonna have a few drinks and play this. And we went through 28 clues, and then we found the culprit. And it seems Sherlock Holmes would have done it in 4.
Yeah, the next after I did that paragraph game, the next thing I saw that used paragraphs was a game called Barbarian Prince.
Yeah,
Arnold Hendrick. Who I got to know because we both worked at Coleco, a very nice fellow. Fortunately, he's passed away now. But that was a great game, Barbarian Prince.
Yeah.
And so that to your point about an RPG, that was a solo RPG.
That's right.
Shortly after Pandora, I would assume from the timing that he was already working on it when Pandora was published. So I don't think he was. I don't think he did it because he saw Pandora. I think he was already working on it, but I'm not sure.
Now, you said solo, John Butterfield and solo. When you were presented with a gig, when you get a gig, does someone present the idea to you, or do you go up to whomever and present your idea to this person? How does that work?
When I was working at SPI, I was on staff, and so it was, as you first said, they were gigs in the sense that we need a game designed on this subject. So that was the case with all of my work for SPI. But once I left SPI, my game ideas always start with me first. I only design something that I'm interested in working on, and then I will try to interest a publisher in publishing it.
Now, going back to SPI with someone presenting you work, saying, "Okay, John, we need a game on space, this and that." What happens? Like, where do you start? Do you start mechanically? I need this mechanically, or do you start? I don't know. What I'm trying to say is I can't even formulate my question because it's so obscure to me. So I guess you would read the synopsis of the game they're asking you to build, and as you're reading, what's happening in your mind? Are you saying, "Oh, I can use this mechanic for that. I can use this mechanic for that. We can do this for that," or do you create stuff? Are you pulling a Newton and creating stuff out of your head, type thing?
Well, at SBI, they had a feedback system where they published game ideas, which were a few paragraphs long, or 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs long, in their Strategy and Tactics magazine, and later in their Ares magazine. And based on which of those feedback proposals got the best reaction,
Okay.
the editorial leadership at SBI would choose which of these germs of ideas to run with. So then some of those proposals I wrote, but others I didn't. And so then we'd look at that proposal and I'd say, well, based on what it says here, how would I solve this? Sometimes mechanics were already suggested in the proposal, sometimes not. And so you look at that and you start, first of all, assessing the proposal critically, like, does this actually make sense? That's what happened with one of my last game designs for SBI was Battle Over Britain, my first attempt at doing a Battle Over Britain game. And that grew out of a proposal by David Isby, who he proposed a strategic game. He proposed a game on the entire Battle of Britain. But if you read the proposal, it also said that every battle, every mission would be resolved individually and tactically, every battle of every day. So it really didn't make sense, because you would have to, you were looking at 3 months of campaigning resolved at an individual aircraft level. It just was impossible. So I had to kind of rethink that and kind of negotiate with the R&D people, our team at SBI, about, well, we've got to make some changes to this concept, and will that still be acceptable to the people who voted it so highly? So we just had to make judgment calls there. There have been cases where there were proposals for games that actually weren't, that were at the wrong scale or didn't make sense. And in some cases, the design would continue that way and actually come out poorly, because there wasn't enough, it was too slavishly staying with the proposal instead of what would make the best design. Especially if it was a game on an existing system, like, Panzer Guderian, or Wacht am Rhein, that was a great game. Let's do another game using that system. But for example, there was a game proposed for the campaign against Moscow, the Germans at Moscow, using the Wacht am Rhein system, which was battalions over a course of 2 weeks. So that scale made sense. But when you apply the same scale to a 3-month battle involving hundreds of divisions, it didn't make sense. But nonetheless, a designer attempted to solve it that way, and it didn't work. So that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. John, okay, so I'm my mind is racing here. Where do I go? I got John Butterfield. What do I do? Check this out, Matt Chesnut. First live stream I've caught on YouTube in months, and it's John MFing Butterfield. You have MF. Is that your middle initials?
You'll have to ask Matt about that.
Matt, I'm happy to have John here too.
What he's doing there.
I just thought that was funny. Now, okay, I have to touch this. Hold on a second. What am I doing? Share screen, Chrome tab, blast, and okay, John, I was very surprised. I was super surprised when you did in short, and I'm gonna belittle it by there's no word. I'm losing my words. It's a Civ game. It's a space Civ game, right?
Well, it's not really civilization building, because the scale is more. It's an exploration game and some space development, but it it's maybe the baby steps towards building a space civilization. It's the beginning of the process, which is interesting you bring up, because I had designed a more of a space version of Civilization a few years back, and it was rejected. I'm proud to say it was rejected by the finest game companies, and so I put it aside. And then a few years ago, I started thinking about, well, what if I just do the game based on the beginnings of the building of a space civilization from a human perspective. So, starting to explore the nearby solar system, and then the whole solar system, and making it commercially viable to be out in space, and then moving out into the stars from there. And that's the range of the whole story in Space Corp. It's played over 3 eras, with a near Earth era, and then an entire solar system era, and then the interstellar neighborhood in the 3rd era. And yeah, so that's how Space Corp came about. And also it's based on kind of the scientific theories behind a series of books that a friend of mine wrote.
Now, I was reading a little bit, an interview on the Farmer's Aid interviewed you. I mean, the Player's Aid. I keep mixing up the
Farmer's Aid. Yeah, agriculture on the moon.
No, the Player's Aid, and I read their interview on the Player's Aid, and the book that you read here. This is basically, obviously, it's a sci-fi book, but it looks more like a business-oriented book, meaning like, how can you explore, expand, but not exterminate? That's what I found funny. There's no extermination here, is there?
Well, who is there to kill?
We're humans.
Yeah,
we're humans. Like Ron.
It's based on kind of very hard science fiction, which is a serious effort to look at how the exploration and development of the solar system might proceed, and why. It's not cost effective to say, oh, we'll go to the asteroids and mine them for stuff and bring it back to Earth, because the cost of doing that is insane.
Yeah.
So there have to be other reasons to be out there, having to do with exobiology, and the development, of exotic elements that don't require you to be landing and taking off from large bodies where gravity makes it cost prohibitive. Yeah.
Now, I know you got Ventures coming out. I'm going to say this is the first expansion, because I know we can go many expansions with this because it's the universe. But anyway, are you going to be incorporating any sort of combat system in Space Corps Ventures?
It sounds like you want that. There is no overt combat system in Ventures, and I don't have a plan for that, even in other expansions, really. There is, but in Ventures, the development there in that expansion is that all the HQs, the corporations, are unique, and they all have different characteristics and missions. 2 of them are more militaristic, one kind of in a pirate way, and the other in a protection way.
And the protection way must be Italians, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, we wouldn't want anything to happen to you,
No, obviously not. But I'm glad. And I ordered Ventures as soon as it came out. Anything John Butterfield, for some reason, I've remortgaged my house, John, on your name many times.
Wow.
And you know what? It's awesome that you broke that stereotype for me. You're not a World War II guy,
Oh.
And you went out, and it's like, what's going on? And what's next? Whatever. And what was I going to say? Okay. So, we've got like 10, 15 minutes left. let's get Space Core out. Now, I know this game here, what I keep doing that. This game here was a huge success. Huge.
Enemy Action Ardennes. Yeah.
Huge success. Did you know it was going to be that successful?
Not particularly. No, I set out first to design a 2-player game that was card driven. I had seen a lot of strategic games that were card driven, beginning with the original, We the People that Mark Herman designed. It was kind of the first card driven game. And then his follow on For the People. And then there was Paths of Glory and Twilight Struggle, all great games that were card driven. And then there was the tactical game system, Combat Commander, is also card driven in the same way, with cards that you can play as actions or as events, or had multi-purpose cards that drove the action. So I thought, well, what about at an operational level? At a single battle level, could there be a card-driven game at like the level of the Battle of the Bulge or another campaign? And so that's what started me designing Enemy Action Ardennes. But then, of course, also being a solo game designer, I decided to, triple the challenge and said, okay, once the 2-player game works, which I designed first, can I also make this playable as a solo experience on either side? And what would that mean? I didn't want to just do a bot for the other player. I wanted your solo experience to really bring in elements of a fog of war, and that you really don't know what the enemy's up to. You play your side as you would in the 2-player game, but the other side is doing something, operating in an entirely different way. It's happening to you instead of the other side seeming like a player. And so that drove the design of the other 2 games in the box. And it's been very well received, but it is complex. They are probably the most complex games not the 2-player game. The 2-player game is of medium to light complexity, I think. I think it's quite playable. But the solo games you have to put up with a lot of procedures in there, but I'm very proud of the way they play out. Now, it's funny, like on Board Game Geek, you read people's reviews and ratings, and there'll be a feature in Ardennes that someone says, because of this feature, it's the best game ever made. And then someone else will say, because of this feature, this is a dog. This is the worst game ever made. So,
yeah, well, you can't please everybody all the time, John. So
well, the first person I'm trying to please first actually is me.
Yes.
Would I want to play this? Yeah. Okay, then I'll do it.
Yeah. No, and that's why that's good for whatever. Now, when you probably at this stage of your designing career, people come to you and ask you, John, would you please create a game? Or you go up to a publisher, and how does that happen? How do you know what game goes to what publisher? And do you have control over component quality?
Well, the relationships I've had with different publishers have there's no rhyme or reason to that, really. It's more like, why do you have the friends you have? And my point there is that, especially as I get older and I'm going to be retiring soon and doing game design more full time, I want to just work with people that I enjoy collaborating with.
Right.
Collaborating both on the creative process and on the production process and the business process.
So you do have a say in what kind of component quality you want.
The actual component quality, like the print quality, not well. I guess in my choice of publisher ultimately, but Sometimes I find out, later what the quality is going to be.
Yeah, I know, because there's some companies that put a lot of thought into component quality, and some other companies, well, they don't. And I don't know. That's the way the business deal runs here. Um, Matt Chesnut, Matt Chesnut. Would that have been viable for a game like?
I still think Compass, I'm reading the question here. I still think Compass could have made a lot more money if they'd actually did publish this as 3 separate games instead of.
Yeah, is that viable?
Well, that is a really good observation, because
Yeah.
that's been a debate that Compass we've had. That is Compass and I, not against each other, but together. Like, well, what would it be? What would it be like if we published these separately? And that was even discussed as a possibility for Enemy Action Kharkov. It wasn't for Ardennes, because that was like a whole new thing, and we didn't really know what it was going to be, in terms of a success or not. So, but when in talking about Enemy Action Kharkov, I thought, well, it would kind of be easier just to do the 2-player first and get that published. But there are some shared components. Like, there's only one set of counters used in all 3 games, and there's a lot of sharing of the cards as well. So in terms of you'd have to have more repetition of components in 3 boxes.
Well, maybe you can have that disclaimer saying you need this first to play this. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's true. Although the sales of an expansion are always a fraction of the sales of the original.
Really?
Well, yeah, it's definitely not going to sell more.
No, I mean, it would sell as much, no?
No, if X people buy the game, X minus Y are going to buy the expansion. Now, sometimes the presence of expansions then increases interest in the original.
That's right.
They see that it's a family, so that helps. But the conclusion was that making the games 3 and 1 makes it a kind of an event. Like
it is an event,
big moment.
And John, it's an event, and it's also a pocketbook event. Because
although Kharkov is less expensive than Ardennes.
Is it really?
Yeah, and you can the pre-pub prices is under.
Oh yes,
yeah, but even it's I think its retail price is going to be 120 or 125, whereas Ardennes was 145.
Yeah, okay. And I don't know if Bill is going to are you getting it published in the States, or is this going to be a Chinese production?
I don't know. I don't know if what parts of it are being published in China and what parts in the U.S.
Because I know. I listened to Bill Thomas talk about how he works things, and why some games are more expensive than others. And before I had listened to that, I was like, man, $150, blah blah blah, or this, or $100 for this game. Well, if it's printed in the U.S., it's more of a local thing. Salaries are more expensive, but it's a give thing, like you're keeping it local. So I understand, and I'd be willing to pay the extra $10-15 if it's made locally. Not that I have anything against the Chinese people or whomever is going to get it printed, but I buy my food locally. I buy all my stuff locally to support the community.
Yeah, well. It's a question of quality and cost and all those things, and I actually don't get that involved in it. I mentioned a little while ago that I'm retiring and I'll be doing games full time, and I've thought idly about, well, maybe I should just start my own game company so I can control everything and make more of the money, which is a laugh because
do you want that headache?
But exactly, do I want to have inventory? Do I want the headache of all that? Or the answer is no.
No,
I do not.
No, I know. I wouldn't either.
Right. Right. So I'm happy to leave those production questions and responsibility to the publisher, and I really appreciate that. And I know that they're taking much more of a financial risk than
Well,
I am when they publish games.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now, before we split here, I got many questions. I got a lot of people. Um, this is the big baby that's coming out now, and I remember when you were at WBC. I think you were demoing this.
Yeah, probably the 2-player version.
Yeah.
Sure. And yeah, because again, that was designed first, and I made sure the 2-player version of Kharkov was working. And one reason I selected Kharkov for the second game, and by the way, it's the third battle of Kharkov, which is the one that's the Soviet Operation Star and Gallop and von Manstein's backhand blow in the late winter, early spring of 1943. And I chose this because it was kind of the opposite of Battle of the Bulge in the sense that in terms of the terrain, it's this wide open battlefield with sweeping maneuvers, but still opportunity for both sides to be on the offensive. So I thought that would make the game easier. And in terms of the 2-player game, it is. There's no special rules about roadblocks and bridge blowing and surprise attacks. You just like set up your units and you fight. Now, for the 2 solo versions, it actually wasn't that much simpler because the much greater opportunity for maneuver meant the AI had to be a lot smarter because the enemy had a lot more. The enemy the AI was trying to deal with had a lot more options. It could move in many more directions and further, and so it had to be taken a lot more into account. So it was a bigger challenge than I thought it would be to do the solo games in here. But now I'm really pleased with the way they came out. They've been extensively tested. Yeah, we're now in final art, and things are going to print soon. So I'm pleased to be through the process. It took longer than I thought it would.
Now you chose Kharkov, and you said it's wide open. There's not much. There's not many things to hide behind.
Right. There's no forest to stop those panzers.
It makes me think of like these ancient games where the map is just beige, and you have
just like a big battlefield.
and
guys are lined up.
and like, where are you
like commands and colors.
So is this what I'm looking at? And
well, there's definitely rivers and forests and cities and things and a road net. So it's not just a big white field. An image of the 2-player map is available on Board Game Geek. I don't know if the Compass site has any game graphics yet.
I don't know. I have to check it out. But as soon as I go on the Compass site, I'm down $500. I mean, this is when I was younger. God, should I even say this? When we were younger, we would spend our money on other things, and now we're spending our money on games. I mean, that's me. But anyways, I digress, John. That's the kind of guy I am, John. I can't stay focused on one thing.
Well, that's what brings so many different ideas to your show.
I have so many ideas, John, that every time I turn around, that idea is gone, and I got a new one. And I mean, if anybody wants to invest in my ideas, trust me, I have many. Anyways.
Good.
So, John, okay. Well, you know what? Before we split, John, what games do you have on your table?
I'm glad you asked. So I'll go like back in from current. So what I'm currently setting up, and I played this before, is Mark Simonich's Ardennes 44, so I'm gonna play with that again. And the reason I'm doing that is because I just took off the table A Time for Trumpets.
That just came out.
That just came out. This is a massive game on the Battle of the Bulge by Bruno Sinigalio. And I enjoyed playing that. I played just a one-map scenario just to see how the system worked and how and the amazing detail he puts into the roles of all the different units in the battle. But then I wanted to contrast that with a slightly more manageable operational look at Ardennes. So I am a fan of Battle of the Bulge. Before that, I went way back in time and played a game I haven't played since shortly after it came out, which is one of mine called Hell's Highway.
No way.
I really hadn't played it since like the mid 80s, so I thought I should do that again. Because just before I played that, I had played Mark Simonic's Holland 44, so I wanted to contrast those. So I played that, and this is all solitaire in the age of COVID, you know.
Yeah.
And I got a couple months ago Jaws of Victory from Mark Hinkle and Milt. It's not Janovich. How do you pronounce Milt's last name? Janowski.
And what?
Janowski. And this is from New England Simulations. An excellent game on the Corsoon Pocket Battle. And again, I was only able to set up one map. There's a half scenario, and I played that. And this is a great game, and also the graphics are just stunning. And then I played another old game, also Lost Victory, which covers the same ground as my Enemy Action Kharkov. This is designed by the late David James Ritchie. It was one of the early GMT games, and it's filled with amazing, kind of really innovative ideas. It's too bad he didn't have a chance to do much more with this system. So I enjoyed playing that. So that's just a quick overview. You can obviously see that it's all been World War II operational.
So you mean that's what you've played in 1 week?
No, this is over like 2 months. Yeah, over the last 2 or 3 months. Yeah, I just put it on the table. I keep each game up for a week or two and tinker with it. Yeah.
Now, okay, as you said, you're a Bulge fan. That's why you got Sinigalio's A Time for Trumpets. That is a massive game. Do you ever see yourself playing the campaign?
Well, if we're able to return to conventions like Consum World Expo, I could see me doing it there.
No way.
But I'd love to try Jaws of Victory in that setting as well with a few people. That's probably the likeliest place where I might do something like that, because it's really conducive to setting up a big game and enjoying it for a few days. I had a great time doing that a couple of years ago with my friends James Terry and Marty Sample. We played Unconditional Surrender, the World War II strategic game from GMT that came out a few years back. We had a good time with that. I did the Dark Valley, Ted Racier's game on the Eastern Front at Consum World. That's a great venue for that, and I hope things improve with the health of the country so that we can get back to that kind of event.
I hope so, man. And it's funny though. You were one of the guests at the San Diego Historical Game, Harold Buchanan's. You
mean the virtual one that he just ran?
Yeah. And you know what? Not being able to go to these cons and all that satisfied a little bit of an itch for me. It actually worked very well.
Yeah, it was better than I expected.
Yeah.
And I had never used Discord before. So
Neither have
I told Harold that my teenage son had to give me a primer because, they understand that sort of thing much more than I do. Even though I work in the tech field in UX, Discord was beyond me. Yeah.
Oh, well, John, I'm going to let you go because you're John Butterfield. I mean, I keep you here for hours.
I've got to make dinner. I'm making pasta. You'll be happy to know.
Yeah. Hold on a second. We can talk about that right now. How are you going to cook your pasta?
How am I going to cook it?
First of all, what type of
Al
pasta?
dente.
Al dente. Okay, that's good. And what are you having?
Well, it's just going to be I haven't decided whether it's going to be like spaghetti or more like a penne, but it's going to be with a vegetarian sauce because my wife's a vegetarian. But then I'll be putting a little meat in mine.
Okay, hold on.
Or a gravy. Should I call it a gravy instead of a sauce?
I have. I'm not going to answer that. Do you have any fresh sage?
No, I don't have any fresh sage. Why?
Because with a penne, you could do a simple pasta, no meat. I'm a meat eater. No meat. You boil your pasta al dente, whatever you want, and you fry fresh sage leaves in butter. But don't bring the butter too high. You're gonna burn the butter. But you want it as the Frenchmen say, beurre noisette. You want it brown a little bit, okay? You can add a little bit of olive oil just to stop the cooking of the butter. Fry your sage. As the sage is frying in the butter and all that, and don't be afraid of butter, John. You take your pasta and fry it in there, man. Woo! Parmigiano Reggiano. Obviously, you get fresh Parmigiano, right, John?
Yes. I always grate it right off the brick.
You're messing with me, right?
No.
Okay, good.
No, I always do that.
No, that was a test you passed.
Oh,
and try that, man. Salt and pepper, fresh sage and butter, and a bit of Parmesan. John?
Well, you're obviously the creative expert and master when it comes to cooking. So, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, John, thank you very much for being here, man.
Pleasure, Dan. Thanks for guiding me through.
Buon appetito. And it's never just a simple pasta meal. That there's no such thing. People have died creating that pasta for you, John.
Okay.
John, thank you very much. And thank you, people. John, stick around a few seconds. Thank you to the people. I could have went more with you guys' question, but it's my show. I have John Butterfield. So anyways, John, stick around. Thank you very much. Peanut Gallery, thank you very much. And I'm going to do the outro here because I am a professional man.
Hi, everybody.